Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 4th planning meeting of the Pine-Richland School Board. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Mrs. Misbach?
Here.
Mr. Kashani?
Here.
Mr. DiTullio? Mr. DiTullio? Mrs. Hayden?
Here.
Dr. Mihalik?
Here.
Dr. Meyer?
Here.
Mr. Moy?
Here.
Mrs. Swope?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Our next item is recognition of visitors. Do we have any online visitors who want to speak to the board?
We do not.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience who would like to address the board at this time? You're reminded, 3 minutes. State your name. Thank you, Ms. Mexer.
I'm Jill Baxter, 25-year resident of Pine, mother of 5, and vice president of Prosper Now, Protect Our Students in Pine and Richland Now. Last month, board members claimed that the recent state order instructing the school to turn over 5 years of documentation relating to complaints of racial and sexual harassment, assault, bullying, hazing, and other safety issues was a potential threat to student privacy. Well, according to Pine-Richland's reports, under the PA Safe Schools Act, there should be almost no documents to release because almost no incidents were even reported. Under the Safe Schools Act, the district must report to the Commonwealth annually the number of complaints of over 50 different types of offenses. You'll find the summarized data on the Prosper Now Facebook page, and here's what it says. In the entire Pine-Richland School District, the total number of complaints filed alleging racial or ethnic intimidation over the last 5 years is 1. The year my Hispanic daughter was repeatedly called the N-word and told to go hang herself, which she reported to 2 school principals, the school claims 0 reports of racial or ethnic intimidation or harassment. Did my daughter's report not matter to you? We at Prosper Now have heard from families that experienced racial harassment so severe that the children left the district. Many of those years also show 0 incidents. Why did the district cover these up? The year my daughter reported being sexually assaulted and raped, Pine-Richland lists 0 complaints of sexual harassment, sexual assault, or rape. Our district, with over 4,500 students and 6 buildings, claims the total number of bullying complaints over 5 years is 11. 4 of the past 5 years show either 0 or 1 complaint of bullying among all 6 buildings all year. Is there anyone in this room who believes these statistics? My own family's reports are more than the entire district numbers. Numerous families have told Prosper Now about incidents they reported to the school that went unaddressed, and those numbers are simply not in the reports. We are left to assume that the district reports only the complaints they act upon and they cover up the rest. It begs the question, whose reports are serious enough to make the cut to put in the official stats to report to the state, the feds, and your own tax-paying community? My kids apparently haven't counted. Rape and sexual assault apparently don't count. Racial and ethnic harassment apparently don't count. Do the students who founded important clubs like the Black Student Union and the Students Against Sexual Harassment Club count? Whose voices are you listening to, whose are ignored, and why are you covering up complaints? I urge every one of our school directors to demand that all of these documents, every single complaint made to the district of an act affecting student safety in the last 5 years, be divulged to the board immediately, and that the board conduct its own investigation into the district's failure to respond or report these complaints. You are our elected representatives, and you need to stop trusting what the administration is telling you and get to the bottom of this.
Thank you, Ms. Baxter. Would anyone else like to address the board at this time?
Thank you. I'm Tom Baxter of Pine, president of Prosper Now, Protect Our Students in Pine and Richland Now. First, thank you to the many community members who continue to contact us at prosprnow.org to report experiences of the district not responding to their complaints. and for reporting to us the district's current attempts to cover up its prior misdeeds. Because our district has not prioritized the safety of our children, our community members have unified to provide this oversight and are courageously speaking up. Please continue to contact us at prospernow.org, and your confidentiality will be respected. Secondly, to the district, there are numerous laws and regulations that obligate you to protect our children. Based on the reports we have, we allege that you have deliberately and indifferently taken repeated action to defy, ignore, and violate literally every single law and regulation obligating you to protect students from harm. First, Federal Regulation Title IX, which protects students from sexual discrimination, harassment, and assault, by your deliberately not investigating these complaints and instead trying to remove complainants from the district. Two, Federal Regulation Title VI, which protects students from racial discrimination and harassment, by similarly not investigating racial harassment complaints. Three, similarly, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, that prohibits sexual, racial, and any other discrimination against K-12 students. Four, the Pennsylvania Child Protective Services Law, by ignoring your mandated reporting requirements to report any unlawful student-on-student sexual contact to Childline. Number five, the Memorandum of Understanding with Northern Regional Police, by not contacting NRPD after receiving complaints of sexual violence, as obligated. Number six, the PA Safe Schools Act, by repeatedly falsifying the annual student safety incident reporting to the state, as just detailed by Mrs. Baxter. Number seven, you've also violated more than half of the points of the State Board of Education's Code of Professional Conduct for Educators, which obligate you all to, among others, to quote, abide by education laws, respect the civil rights of students and not discriminate on the basis of race and sex and other attributes, and C, to exert reasonable effort to protect students from conditions which are harmful to their health and safety. And number eight, for all of these reasons, allegations will be submitted to law enforcement for violation of at least 5 criminal statutes for you to protect children, among them child endangerment, child neglect, abuse, and others. In summary, this district leadership has deliberately violated literally every single law and regulation that protects our children from harm at school. We are pursuing accountability and change as detailed in our August 2nd and 16th board meetings. Stay tuned.
Would anyone else like to address the board at this time? Correspondence, Ms. Williams, and Ms. Misbach, if you could do the minutes for approval. I have to replace my machine with one over there. One in love.
Thomas Gaynor emailed the board regarding number of students on a bus seat. John Green regarding the number of students on the bus seats. Rita Kastner regarding instructional support, and Jennifer Busey regarding instructional support.
Item 1.04 are minutes for approval. It's a motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes?
Yes.
Any opposition? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. We have a brief educational update tonight. I think you have the PowerPoint. Okay. Go ahead to the next slide, Sean. Okay, again, it was our goal to start the year to have kids back in school, and as we've talked about, we have about 99.5% of our students in-person learning. And we know that is the desire of the community, it's the desire of the school, and some of the questions facing school districts is how to manage that effectively given conditions and what's happening. And so we are very pleased to say now, a month into the school year, it has been positive. Again, you can feel some of the energy, as we talked about at the last meeting, that you could feel pre-COVID. It is still a little different, but the students are glad to be with their classmates back in school. We have all of our co- and extracurricular activities going on, and we've been able to have continuity with that. We also had the fundamental goals to limit disruptions due to particularly quarantine. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. We knew we would need to make changes, and we know that we need to continue to be open to changes as time continues to pass. Next slide, Sean. This is merely to reflect we remain on the right in high transmission. That's the CDC indicator for incidence rate. And on the left, it's Allegheny County, again, just demonstrating increase in cases over time. However, again, as the sort of the surges and different waves of this have occurred, there is some hope that we're at a plateau of the current wave, and hopefully we can begin to see the impact of that. Next slide. This was a snapshot taken last Friday. So we've had more cases since then, I'll mention that, but every Friday we've been updating the website. This is where things stood for September. We ended up, so you can see there we had 82 cases of students or staff. We ended up, I think, at 85 cases in the month of September. You can see on the bottom sort of what we experienced last year. So that does give you a little bit of an indication of, what was happening in terms of virus. And again, those are cases, positive cases of either a student in the school or a staff member within the school. Next slide. What we had mentioned prior to the first day was this, and part of the recommendation of the health and safety plan was when students are masked, then we can have students 3 feet apart, and if everyone is appropriately masked, not need to quarantine. The exception to that challenge was the cafeteria. And so when we began and again, the big difference between last year and this year, last year we had half, if you will, maybe even a little less than half of the students physically present every day. That allowed us to spread students out, not only in the classrooms, but also in the cafeteria. This year we have almost everybody back. And so the cafeteria was the one place where when we started the year, we did not have 6 feet of physical distancing. Next slide. And so that impacted what we were feeling and seeing in terms of quarantine needs when there was a positive case of a student, particularly of students. So year to date, again, this was a snapshot from last Friday, but you could see that we had 82 cases. You see the breakdown, students and staff, and we had 107 students or staff, mostly students, in quarantine based upon a school-related case. So these numbers reflect school. There were more people in quarantine than are reflected by those numbers, but those are based on cases outside of school. So for example, if a mom or dad is COVID positive in the home and there's 2 children that are school age at home, those students would be quarantined. They would not be reflected here. These are quarantined based upon a case being in the schools. Next slide. What happened a little over, it's probably been a week and a half now, is we really expanded the cafeterias in all of the schools to try to spread students out to that 6 feet. And as a result of that, the cafeteria was the place that was causing quarantine, and we are now seeing significantly that even when there's a positive case of a student, because of the classroom set up with masks and because of the cafeteria using auxiliary spaces, the number of students being quarantined is often 0 or maybe 1. And so we're seeing a significant reduction. If you want to go back for a second, Sean. So again, this slide benefits from the last 10 days. The ratio of cases to quarantine was even higher at the start of the month. Next slide. But now we see, much less quarantine, which obviously is positive for student learning and for continuity. Next slide. This is just an example of the high school. Again, about 1,450 students at our high school. We're using 4 spaces to manage lunches and spreading students out, weather permitting. That's a benefit at different schools as well, but these show the examples of those. Every building has Different flexibility, different degrees, but we have things happening in all of the different schools to try to spread students out. Next slide. And so again, just to follow up from where we were before, in addition to our Pine-Richland policy, the Pennsylvania Department of Health and PDE have extended the mask requirement through at least the end of October. When that originally came out, I think it was through the beginning of October. It has been extended through the end of the month at least. And then we believe we need to continue to monitor, what's going on here. And if there are changes to any of the components of our health and safety plan, we make them thoughtfully so that we can, again, keep kids in school. I mean, that's the goal, is to have as much continuity as possible. Again, hopeful that for those who are planning to get the vaccine, that the potential for that for students 5 to 11 years old, hopefully will be coming sooner rather than later, and that seems to be the indication right now. Thank you.
Can I have a question about the online platform and the access for the students who are on quarantine? Because that seems to be an issue of the last week or so. And it seems like there's a lot of misunderstanding when the student is eligible to access the classes online, whether they have to have confirmed COVID test or when they are just quarantining, or can we include students who are on medical excuses for a different reason, but they are able to learn, like they have just keeping everybody safe?
So we are encouraging folks, if they have a student who is sick, first off, if those symptoms, if we recall back to our Group A, Group B symptoms, if it would require testing, we're encouraging folks to do so. And if they're sick, we're also cognizant that a lot of students are feeling the pressure to keep up academically, and if you're sick, we want you to be sick. So we're allowing time to make up work, etc. If they have a confirmed COVID test and they're in isolation, they're able, again, only if they're feeling up to it, we encourage them to log in and live stream, but they're able to do so. And if they're a true contact, a close contact from exposure to a positive case, then they're able to live stream. So families in those situations are to contact the school nurse and share that information. Most times we're also aware and sharing back to the family if we're aware of some of those things and making that instruction available. If a student is sick, and they require a test, something that is not known widely, but we're trying to communicate this through the school nurses anytime this comes up. The CDC has approved at-home testing in addition to what was rapid tests, PCRs, things that are conducted at actual labs. So families are able to utilize an at-home test. We just ask them to write the name and the date of the child on there, and as soon as they have a result, taking a picture of that, emailing it to the school nurse, and then return them to the school environment according to their timeline. So I think that's one piece that will help. But again, as the situation is coming up, the nurses are communicating that to the families.
Well, I know that there is shortage of tests.
Absolutely.
And there is at least 3 days waiting for the PCR results. So I know that some students, they should have a right to continue education if they are feeling good enough to participate even online.
Yeah,
I feel like we should discuss opening this platform for students who have confirmed medical situation that stops them from coming to school to keep everyone else safe, because this is we are becoming stuck. We're sending students away and blocking. It's a barrier to education, which we hope to elevate.
I would add, I'd say, one of the challenges, an area of focus is in-person learning. I mean, we have committed to that, and we heard that from our families. They want in-person learning, and we've communicated that to our staff, that as you prepare your lessons, your focus is on in-person learning. We talked about the challenge of the hybrid last year. It was necessary, and they did a great job with it. Not ideal, but it's a challenge to be able to present content when you have both platforms. We understand the passive concept of the link. For us, I guess the struggle right now is, when is it no? Is it if I'm sick for this reason or that? So it makes it very challenging to make a determination of when the link would be provided or not. So again, at this point, The agreement is that we would provide the link in those cases that Dr. Justice just mentioned. We did have some challenges last year with some, we believe, taking a little advantage of the opportunity to stay at home, and that doesn't align with our focus on in-person learning.
I'm talking only about the medical excuses, like confirmed by nurse or the doctor.
But I also think that we've had a few emails from parents with students who have allergies, and it's uncomfortable to wear a mask, and and they need to be home, or they want to be home because they can't have the mask on, or they don't want to be sneezing and coughing in the classroom. They might have other symptoms, but just, that may be COVID-like, but that aren't COVID, and they stay home, and they aren't really, that sick. And I agree with Kasha that this has kind of become a barrier to them learning. And I understand some of the people that did take advantage of the situation, but at the same time, to have to police that seems like it's creating a lot of extra work for who's ever monitoring that, the attendance or whatever the reasons are. And I'm not a teacher, and I don't know what it would be to have just to turn on the microphone, or so that the student can hear and share the presentation, but not take part, just as is the case for anyone who is COVID positive and has that, why everyone else can't do, participate in that manner, to at least, take away that barrier.
So I would address, the nurses are working with families. So if we have a student who has seasonal allergies and they've been tested, it's not that, there are symptoms, but they're unrelated to that, a physician is able to write a note and explain what that condition is so that the school is aware. And that the nurse would be able to work with them. I understand the face coverings piece of that is separate and apart, but there would be nothing preventing them from returning to the environment, with the negative test and a note and so forth. But I hear your comments as well, so understood.
And I guess the other is that there's some thought, and whether that happens or not, is that kids are going to come in if they feel like they are maybe have symptoms, but they can hide them, or they might have been exposed, don't want to say anything. Because they don't want to miss class. I mean, there's some kids that do. But anyway, I just think that I agree with how Kasha worded it, that a barrier.
Yeah, again, it's a good and fair question. And I think that's the challenge of delivering education in the pandemic. It is, I wish there were clear, easy answers. We've worked collaboratively with our association. The board just saw the memorandum of understanding and approved that. We've worked to try to balance that. Again, so teachers and educators feel supported and able and equipped to do an excellent job in the classroom. There are those, we're seeing fewer examples of quarantine for COVID. We're seeing the cases that we showed up there. One message is, if you're sick, you're sick. You don't have an expectation of learning, you have an expectation of getting well. I mean, that's important. Kids will put a lot of pressure on themselves. Kids who are not feeling well also feel the pressure of not falling behind. And so they'll push themselves in different ways, and that's all a part of this. So, we understand the question. As they're coming up now, we're responding individually to families, and we're talking through that. Students have access to information, they just don't have that, at this point, that passive component. So again, I don't know what else to say other than we understand that. I think this will continue to evolve. We'll continue to work family by family, and given the big picture of things, we've had about as much successful return with the least disruption as we could have hoped, and that's despite having 85 cases just in September alone.
And I would think back to peace of mind, not a 100% guarantee, but the fact that we do have everyone spread out 3 feet. We have very, very high mask compliance. We're set up in a way that we've designed since last year that we're expecting people to come to school COVID positive and asymptomatic. So the way that we have everything set up, it should protect anyone from being at risk, particularly because we've spread our lunches back out. So that should feel a lot better. The quarantine numbers have gone down, as Dr. Miller mentioned, as a result. But that in the back of your mind as well. So if people are coming, our nurses are still working. If teachers refer them, or if they self-report, to the nurse's office, office with symptoms, we are sending them home and we're following
But
up
we're
on those
also
things
heading
as well.
into flu season, so like we may take a little bit of proactive approach and just watching the data.
And maybe to help you a little with the practical implementation of what it looks like. So, there's on the continuum, there is, no links available. And then there's all links available to anybody whenever they want to use the links. That's the left and right of that. We started out with no links, and we saw the number of quarantines, so we made some adjustments, and then we made some physical adjustments to decrease the number of quarantine. To make a determination of right now who gets the link, that takes some work, because that's a coordination with our school nurses, with us, with our teachers, and that has to be communicated out. The challenge of on a daily basis understanding the needs of each family of whether it hits the threshold of a link or not it would just be a significant challenge. So not to say, again, we won't evolve into something as we move along the continuum and understand this, but there is a practical implementation that we have to think about on a day in and day out, and how that's communicated to staff, and then the links are provided to the right students based upon their individual needs. I mean, that's just that's the challenge of it.
Dr. Malik?
Yeah, I just want to say there's also an element of this that is just based off of technological innovation and change. Like, there is a capability that exists now that we demonstrated as a district so well last year that increases the ability to deliver content off-site through the platform. And so part of this conversation is about what are the limits of that? Some of it is directly driven by COVID, but there are other dimensions of this that are at play now. And I think we're going to have to keep talking it through to see where we settle in at the right place that encompasses all of this that's happened.
Thank you, man. I agree. I would encourage parents who are in that situation, and we heard some very specific situations described with allergies, and that could make, if I was fully alert, you wouldn't want to sit next to me. I would encourage parents to ask, and students to contact their teachers, teacher by teacher. I understand what it says at that policy level and the board level, but ask the individual teacher. I'd like to see more of that happening. I'd like to see more flexibility from the workforce in offering that virtual option. Saying that it might be abused or it's hard aren't good reasons at this point where we are to not be making an effort. Doing so just okay is all right, because that's what you have to do to get really good at this, maybe. So if there's a fear or a hesitance on that, I would hope that that could be overcome as well. Any other thoughts on the topic?
I was just going back to the testing. I would, and I understand what everyone's saying about the different illnesses, but as someone who's been in the classroom, I also understand how hard it is. And, I won't get into it, but it's not as easy as just flipping a switch. So there is that. However, with the testing, since, my daughter recently went through this, I would encourage maybe if we, as soon as you're tested, you can say, okay, look, I've been tested, and I can't come back to school until I have the results. If we can show proof of testing, can we open up the links? Because that way, while you're waiting to get those test results, you might be feeling fine, and you could do school. So that's, maybe that's a compromise that we could think about. Especially because it is, after Addison was tested, we went on a hunt looking for tests, and you cannot find them. And we actually waited 6 hours to get our testing done. And a lot of parents don't have that ability.
What's interesting to a certain extent about this discussion is we don't, COVID's done this a lot to us, right? We end up getting down in the weeds and being overly prescriptive. And I understand why. So student absences and how teachers make up for that instructional time is something that's been happening since as long as there have been student absences. It's not something that rises to consideration in most school boards, right? I would encourage more flexibility from instructors than what I'm hearing. And I'm not certain that it's always not the instructors. It may be hesitance because the policy says, in the community, they're hearing, well, the policy says this. Well, our policy doesn't say anything about how you make up your 7th grade, pre-algebra homework. It's just done. You contact the instructors and you work with that teacher. I understand, for instance, if you have chemistry lab, this is not chemistry lab of last year, where things were definitely designed around having students virtual. That's going to be an issue, and it's going to be much harder to make up. But if it's a literature discussion in an English class, in an ELA class, let's give it a shot. So I don't want to be prescriptive, but I would want to encourage more attempts to be more expansive in the response.
Just because we did bring up the student attendance piece there, I wanted to just mention that, in implementing this, we had to work a lot with our state reporting administrators, so to help understand how we report all of this, because we needed quarantine credit codes so that we would be actually accounting students for finishing their work, and we have set the system up so it's already crediting the child for having completed the work and followed along, and then we're going back and modifying that in cases where it needs modified, where maybe a student has not. So we're trying to approach it that way. If a student is out sick and making up work, it is a medically excused absence because they're not doing things in the same way. But if it's an official quarantine or isolation and they're following along and they're keeping up with the instruction, they are not being marked absent as a result of that, so long as they're keeping up with their work, because there is an instructional body for which there is a product that they have been able to do that we're able to credit in that way. So I wanted to mention that there is flexibility in that regard that is being reported to the students at present.
That's why we don't go down the weeds, because we don't know all these things.
Just one thing I'd like to add, I don't want to lose sight of, we have 2 learning management systems at Pine-Richland, and for secondary, we have Blackboard. For K-12, we have Google Classroom. And we're much more proficient than ever before in terms of providing information to students without the link. So things like, recorded lessons, they're happening. They're posted to a Blackboard site. So in some cases, I'd say maybe before you send the email to a teacher, see if that learning structure is meeting the needs of your child, because I think in many cases that's how it's designed. Mm-hmm. And they will experience that learning expectation outside of Pine-Richland in their college university. Carla, you can maybe speak to that, but just from family experience, we see that, and it's not ideal. We want kids in person. That's the place that we see learning happening. For most of our kids, that's an ideal place for them. But when they can't be there, and while we're trying to figure this out, we do have resources like Blackboard and Google Classroom that we want students to take advantage of, and the teachers are doing a nice job of posting resources there as well.
When we very first started seeing the need to quarantine, we did reach out and ask to be added as teachers, if you will, on classrooms for certain teachers to see what it was that was being sent home, and the way in which they can differentiate and post things for particular students that only show up for those students, not for the entire class, is just really awesome. And the teachers did a great job. I would highlight them by name, but I'm sure they'd be mortified. But there were some folks that really did a very nice job at that. And so we're very proud of what they are able to accomplish currently.
Mr. DiTullio has his hand.
Go ahead, Mr. DiTullio.
Overall, where are we with absences, not compared with last year, because obviously that was an anomaly, but if we go back to the 2019 school year, where are we to date absent-wise? Are we up 20%, down 20%, pretty much even? Where are we with that?
We know that our quarantine numbers were up significantly at the start of this year, given the contact that people have had within the cafeteria. I don't have, Greg, off the top of my head, a percent, but that would have, some of that would be expressed within that number up until the time period where we caught up with the accounting, if you will, with the codes. So that's something we can follow up.
Yeah, that would be interesting to note. Non-quarantine related absences is what I'd be interested in looking at, because are parents keeping kids home a lot more often because of, i.e., allergies, things that they would have normally sent their kids to school for. If there's a significant uptick, that's what I'm interested in. Not quarantine. We've already got a carve out for those folks. But what kind of percentage are we talking? Are we talking 1-2%? That's a way you handle it with one-offs. If we're up 50%, that's something that we should probably have a different discussion on.
Yeah, we'll bring that back to the next October public meeting. We'll look at 18-19, just what did September look like at each of the building levels in terms of overall attendance. And again, it's probably somewhere like 96 to 99% present. And then we'll compare that to the first month of this school year. Again, it may be hard to pull some of it out. We'll do the very best we can in terms of the why, but at least it'll let us get a big picture at what it looks like.
Yeah, and there is some coding. I think it sounds, Greg, what you're specifically interested in is like medically excused absences versus vacations versus,
Yeah, not necessarily medically excused. So
non-COVID.
Somebody's son or daughter has sniffles that are seasonal allergy, but they're unsure. They don't necessarily go to the doctor. They give them some allergy medicine maybe in a day or two. They're well enough to come back, or they don't have the symptoms. That's what I'm talking about, because every time somebody gets the sniffles, we don't run to the doctor. So that's what I'm talking about.
Non-COVID.
Non-COVID.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll look at non-COVID, and we'll try to compare it to September of, we can do September of 19.
Just one thing on that, in other statistics, like last year, cases of overall flu were greatly reduced because of mask wearing. And so there may be some interactive effects with the mitigation strategies mixed in there as well, too.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good.
One other question real quick. I know I talked about this the last time. Do we have data on how many of the quarantines became positives?
4. So let me describe that. So this year we have 4 examples of someone who was placed in quarantine because they were a close contact and then later tested positive. Now, we can't necessarily say they became positive because of a close contact in school. We can't do that. But there are 4 cases where students were in quarantine based on a school circumstance and then later tested positive. Okay, so and we're up to...
So the maximum is about 5%.
Yeah, so we're talking 4 out of, I think right now, we're probably at like 86 student cases, so 4 out of 86.
But were all 86 tested, or did they just wait out their quarantine?
All of those cases, to be counted as a case, had to be a verified case through testing.
That led to a quarantine.
The only answer we can give is the answer to the question he's asked. Well, I mean, I'm answering the question.
But I heard answers. No, but I heard answers. I heard percentages and maximum. You can't draw a percentage because we didn't test all of the kids who were quarantined. So to say only about 5% of the quarantined children developed COVID is not, that you can't make that statement unless we tested a robust number of the students who were quarantined, either all of them or a valid sample, and we backtrack to it. So I heard a conclusion and a 5% that I felt wasn't valid given the data that we have. Greg, because we don't know how many children simply just waited out their quarantine. Do you see what I'm saying?
Without coming to a conclusion, what I will say is this. We have had 4 examples that we're aware of where someone who went into quarantine because of a school-based close contact eventually tested positive, which means they got tested and the test came back positive. We have no idea whether there's a connection there, and we have no idea how many of those in quarantine got tested and tried to return on day 8, or how many of them did not get tested and returned on day 11.
Makes sense. All right, we're going to move on to item 2.02, diversity, equity, and inclusion update. We did have a joint governance meeting this evening at 6 p.m. I know most of our in-person audience was here for that as well. I'd like to turn this topic over to Dr. Pasquinelli, if I could.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. So again, just briefly to give you a summary, if you can go to the next slide. Topics were around implementation and structure of input, and on goals for the 21-22 school year. We spent the majority of time talking about Policy 832, educational equity, to get board input. So again, back to how we have been listening to community and determining next steps and goals with this key strategic initiative. Again, it was key last year. It is still a key initiative. The image that's on the slide right now shows how we have expanded this out across the district, both with expanded team and building-based team, so every school has a building-based team. We have a strong partnership with the Community's Anti-Racism Coalition that we spend time with them just about every month discussing some of the ideas that we have and community input. We have a leadership council that includes students, parents, staff members. We have alumni on that as well this year. And then, of course, we listen through school board. So that ongoing process for making recommendations for what's next with this key initiative will continue. So if you go a couple slides down, we'll jump to the goals for this year. Click a couple more. Okay, back, there you go. So we've shared these goals with all of those stakeholder groups to provide some feedback. That's where we landed this year. So aggressive goals in terms of things we want to accomplish, but we're really proud of what we accomplished last year through this same type of process with the key strategic initiatives. Just to give you some quick overview. So we had 5 buckets of work that we were thinking about last year. One was family and community outreach and partnerships. We partnered with Anti-Racism Coalition. We developed the DEI Leadership Council. And we added DEI demographic questions to our annual stakeholder survey. That's in that bucket. In staff training and development, we trained with an overall, just an introduction to DEI to all of our teachers. We built out building-based teams, as I mentioned, and we started to establish around common language, and that common language was then communicated over the summer to our entire community. We have another bucket called student organizations and school culture. That's student voice. We established 2 black student unions, one at the middle school and one at the high school. We have students on our DEI Leadership Council. We have increased student initiatives in terms of clubs that students are coming forward, said, I'd like this or that, and we have supported those. And our peer-to-peer student group was highly engaged, working with our elementary students to promote some DEI initiatives. Under curriculum instruction, we really worked hard in terms of implementation of key recommendations coming out of our in-depth program review, and that's where the learning is impacted in the classroom and in the schools. So that work happened last year as well. And then finally, around policies, procedures, and hiring practices, we adopted Policy 103 and developed ARs for that particular policy. And really worked more strategically in looking at the recruitment for more diversity through our hiring process. That's last year, so we're proud of the work that was accomplished last year, and you can see the goals that we have planned for this year. If it's okay, I'll jump to the next, which is 832. We spent the majority, if you want to go to the next slide, the majority of our conversation at our joint governance meeting was around this policy. So this policy is available on board docs for the community to review. We received input from the board in terms of some of the language, but we're really focused on how do you implement this policy that we believe is in the best interest of not just our student body, but our community. And this is our tentative timeline that we have here presented on the screen.
Any other comments from board members? I think, do we need separate
Here,
discussion? Go ahead. Mr.
Yeah, Peter,
Kashani.
Mark here.
Yep.
Just on the timeline again, I think if we were already into this and the third read would have occurred prior to December 13th, that would be a very different situation. I just think that to come in to the third read on the 13th is it's a very awkward timeline that we should either push it out one more week so we can get the first read in, but at least give any new board member the chance to weigh in on 2 reads after they're sworn in. So again, I'll just throw that out there because there is a likelihood that we get into the third read and that we have a majority of the board who doesn't approve it. So what do we do then?
May I?
If we're okay with that, then fine. But it warrants some discussion.
I would just like to reiterate that our Black and brown families have waited a long time, and our families that support LGBTQIA students have waited a long time. And I think they're tired of waiting, Mr. Kashani, and I don't think that's a fair ask of them.
Yeah, this policy's been kicking around for quite a while, Mark, in addition. Sorry, go ahead, Matt. I didn't see it. Yeah, so it's not like it's coming out of the blue at all. We did hear from board members or candidates, Mark, as you assert tonight, who supported it. I'm not sure who else you might be referring to. There is a candidate who could have participated and taken Ms. Hayden's seat, chose not to even participate in that process. I'm not sure, Mark, why we should be taking those opinions unexpressed by people who don't sit on the board over people who sit on this board now, this body. It just doesn't make sense.
My comments are long.
Well, then I
similar-
guess, we can agree to disagree, Peter. I'm just telling you that there's I'm being realistic about it and also am attempting to be fair to everybody, frankly.
No.
So
I don't
that's
think it's
fine.
fair to current board members, Mark.
What I want to say is this is an open process, right? I mean, this is a public meeting. If anyone who has any concerns about the policy, they're welcome to come and speak, whether you're a candidate for office or not, or a member of the community. People who care about this can tune in, and they can learn about what's written here. And if people don't like it, they can share their thoughts and opinions. We've seen over this past year that people in this community are not shy about speaking up about things that they don't like. And so I think, that applies here. The board should continue to do its work and move things forward. It makes sense. This is all being vetted in the open. And if things come up in December that people want to raise, we can raise them and address them at that time.
So at this point, the first read of the policy is scheduled for the October voting meeting. I think that covers it. We don't need separate discussion. Okay. We do have some action items on tonight's planning meeting agenda. Item 3.01 is a motion to approve the personnel and supplemental items as attached.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.02 is a motion to approve student attendance at the spring music department trip as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.03 is a motion to approve an adjustment of the hourly wage for athletic workers.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes. Yes?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.04 is a motion to approve the student teachers and practicums as attached.
Second?
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes. Yes?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.06 is a motion to approve the casting of a vote on behalf of the school district.
We need to do, sorry to interrupt. We need to do 3.05.
Oh, did I? Sorry.
That's okay.
Item 3.05 is a motion to approve Beth Schenefeld and Kelly Gustafson to attend the American Association of School Libraries Conference.
Second?
Is there any discussion?
I would just like to add that these two ladies have been advocates on the forefront of library development and implementation. When it came to the standards here in Pennsylvania, they were on the forefront, authorship, included. They've been helping write chapters around the ways in which libraries can be the hub of learning within the schools, et cetera. So I can't say enough about the asset that these two women are to our organization and how they're helping to develop our library programming. It's outstanding. So thank you for your support, hopefully.
Agreed. Any other discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.06 is a motion to approve the casting a vote on behalf of the district for the following individuals as officers of PSBA. Mr. David Scott as president-elect, Ms. Allison Mathis as vice president, and as trustees for the Insurance Trust, Richard Freirich, William Lakoff, and Nathan Maines.
Second?
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.07 is a motion to approve the first reading of Board Policy 006 meetings and 903 public participation in board meetings as attached.
Second?
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes. Yes? Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Mr. Kashani, Finance, please.
Item 4.01 is an informational item that on the October 18th meeting, we'll be approving financial reports and accounts payable. Item 4.02 is an informational item as well that will be asked to approve budget transfers. And 4.03 is a reminder that we have a finance governance meeting scheduled for December 13th at 6.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. DiTullio, Buildings and Grounds.
Item 5.01 is an informational item that will be considered at the regular October meeting for purchase of exterior furniture at the Ram Cage concession area.
Thanks, Greg.
And I do have a discussion point if no one else does. Just looking for, was this in the original budget as part of the Ram Cage, or is this in addition to?
Okay, can you hear me? I'm not sure.
I can, yes.
Can. Okay, wait. I think I got it. This ended up to be in the capital funding plans. This was not in the original Ram Cage budget, but it was in the capital funding plan as planning for this upcoming year. So it was in there, it just wasn't in the original project plan.
Okay.
Just to add, Greg, one of the things I would add to it, and I know it's in the description here, we never anticipated how important outdoor learning classrooms could be, but this provides the other option to be able to have an outdoor learning space. That could be an outdoor learning space within the school day, or it could be a place for teams or groups to meet outside of the school day in that area.
Okay, thanks. I'm completely in favor. I just wanted to know where it was on the budget. I would also move that this item, along with any other items that folks decide should be there, go to a consent agenda for the October meeting, if there are no objections.
Agreed. We'll provide a list of items to the board further, yeah. Thanks, Greg. Dr. Meyer?
Item 6.01, Career Education and Work Standards Tool Evaluation. This is an informational item, and I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Justice to explain.
Yeah, thank you. So last time that you had seen this, when this was in front of the board, we were talking specifically about Smart Futures as a tool that would be a warehouse and reporting feature that we were looking at to be a solution, particularly at the elementary level where we have not been able to do anything outside of our paper folders in a filing cabinet. So either way, this will be an enhancement. Instead of only looking at Smart Futures, we have become aware of an additional vendor that would meet our key requirements at the elementary level. Their name is Zello. So we have vendors coming in to do a presentation virtually to our school counselors. The list of keys that they developed was done through a K-12 lens, so that eventually we can take other tools through that and looks at additional programming. We are in our final year of Naviance that we're utilizing at the secondary level. So these are all things we're thinking through as we are looking at creating a plan. At the moment, we'll be evaluating that through just the K-6 lens to try to find us for this year to help us with reporting outside of what's available currently. And we will have you later on in the month.
I thought it was interesting at the advisory council, the school council
Yes.
advisory meeting that Beatty Smart Futures and said that, that could be tied in.
Yes.
The information, put a file and carried through with the student even into the future.
And there are other users within Pennsylvania. A lot of school districts are partial to this tool because it was developed with the P standards and the CW standards in mind. So if a child were to transfer from one other, there would be the ability to import sort of their evidence portfolio, again, through Smart Futures, but we're going to have similar functions and then, compare the two, and we will have an executive summary to you with our recommendations, but stay tuned.
Thank you.
Item 6.02 is an informational item. It's just a reminder, the government meeting is scheduled for November 18th, 2021. The 2021 annual report will be presented. This is an off-night meeting, and there's no board meeting afterwards.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Student Services, Ms. Swope.
I have 5 information items. 7.01, next meeting, motion to upgrade the district huddle package from a sports facility to a district-wide package for the discounted cost of $25,000 per year for a 3-year contract.
If I can give more detail on that. So we've had huddle since 2011. It's somewhat piecemeal depending on the programs. Some programs are more than others. But we see great benefit in using this resource for our coaches, our student athletes, and even other programs through this particular package. Plus, moving into this franchise package gives us unlimited storage. That's significant because we have already met or exceeded our storage capacity. And when you start exceeding, the costs go up. So that was definitely a key consideration, this recommendation. The other key is integrating more programs. So with the storage, we can introduce this at the middle school level, which is really where we're doing even more learning around teams and athletics and individual skill development. And we see integrated into band so that the mounting system allows our band to do some that they were never able to do before without actual people up there, film, whatnot. So it integrates other programs besides athletic as a possibility to use this resource. It's really slick if you haven't seen it before. And the other kids market themselves. So if they're interested in being recruited, then they have tools that they can market and showcase some of their skills for others to see. With this package, there are 4 camera systems, and the plus of the camera system is they're mounted. So one would be mounted at the stadium, one at the Ram Cage, one at the main gym school, and one in the main gym at the middle school. that eliminates the need for a person to be. So, we have great parents that come out and are willing to volunteer, but it is asking a lot of people to do that. So now we can film during practices and and that just increases the amount of feedback that these student athlete program participants can receive. So excited about that feature. And the last say was really, well, a couple more. Streamlining allows to live stream without a physical person there. It still gets TV students involved in editing and working with it, but it increases the opportunities to live stream more events for our community that can't make it to an event. So that's exciting for outside of the area. And the last one I think I'm most excited about is the professional development of this package, because we have coaches I think that are they're learning, they're experiencing a bit of what this program can do. But the professional development, we're talking about that for coaches and for students and parents, because like I said, there's a lot of features that students can use to help themselves. So we've come to this with a 3-year, $25,000. That is an increase, but we think there's program advantages to support this recommendation.
Yeah, I found it interesting with the ball technology. That seems like really, really cool. Cool at it, and also running out of storage for the videos for some sports, so like definitely good move.
And the
Items.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, just want to.
So the cost, right now, it's like 16,000.
25.
The current cost is over 11,000.
Oh, 11. I'm sorry. Okay.
But with the increase in storage, it would go up to almost 17,000. So that would not include then all programs that I mentioned.
Right.
So we feel like that makes sense. Again, a little bit of an increase of opportunity for a lot of programs.
Just a reminder, everyone makes her on, and we have a lot of online participation. So.
Item 7.02, Crisis Center North Memorandum of Understanding of the renewal of the MOU between the Pine-Richland School and Crisis Center North, supporting PR students and families, trauma and violence for the school year. I don't know if Dr.
There we go. This would be a resource for our students as well as our families. If they're experiencing any trauma, they would direct the school. It would be a counselor coming into the school to work with the families as well as the students. And it would be confidential and referred through our student assistance programs. So it's a great resource for families as well as our students.
Thank you.
And this is a renewal of something that's in place, and this is separate and different than the Holy Family School-Based Mental Health Service. Again, it's a different tool, but it's another option
resource
available
for our families. Correct.
Yeah. Item 7.03, motion to approve for the next meeting the list of PDO and booster organizations as recognized in accordance with School Board Policy number 915. That will be provided prior to the next meeting. Item 7.04, information item for the consideration to approve the small game of chance resolution for the school year to support the booster and parent organizations. And 7.05, trip to Germany, November 2022. The students and application of the student discipline code for German students to travel to Germany for the field trip. There is no cost to the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasha.
Thank you. Item 8.01 is an information item for board consideration, motion to approve the personnel and supplemental items as applied prior to the meeting. And then item 8.02, information item about Title I parental involvement in family engagement.
Thanks, Matt. I'm excited about item 10.01, October 18th. our meeting regarding sustainability, which, to be honest with myself, would have taken place earlier if it wasn't for COVID. Let's just so glad to be moving that ball forward now. That is embedded in our strategic plan, and we will tackle that. And as always, November 15th, regarding the model for teaching. We reiterate the board goals here. I haven't received any separate on our discussion. We'll leave them on the agenda for discussion and reflection. 1.01 reports from board or administration.
Just for PSPA, I do wanted to know, I wanted two legislation pieces. First one was House Bill 12, and this was for vouchers. That would have gone, I probably my mic on, but I was using my teacher voice. Would have gone to vouchers for schools that didn't provide full-time in-person instruction, and provide a lot of overview, and it was going to be very expensive to districts and to the taxpayers. And I particularly want to thank Representative Ms. Gorski for voting no. She voted no to the policy. Other House bill that I want to note that hasn't been voted on yet is an expansion of charter schools. PSBA is concerned about this expansion because there is no public oversight. There is no accountability in the plan. And the other thing, it does not address the skewed funding formula. So in other words, if a special education student go to a charter school, it doesn't matter what level of special education they get, the charter school gets the amount, which is a lot of money. So there, and I will provide more updates as it moves forward. That is it.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Any other updates?
I don't really have a report, but I attended Proftoberfest, the our educational foundation fundraiser for this year, annual fundraiser. It was well attended and a great time.
And you went right from there and joined us at the Pine-Richland Athletic Hall of Fame banquet. Another success, and we've mentioned that a couple times here, but bears mentioning again, it was end of recognition for those individuals and for the community. Thank you, especially Rachel Hathorn and Mr. Kashani, who was on that committee.
And it was really nice when their stories, when the recipients or the Hall of Fame inductees shared their stories with everyone, and how touching and emotional that it was for them from years ago, but to be brought forward and recognized. So it was really a nice event.
Agreed. I do have one additional update from the intermediate unit. As some of you may know, the state, along in many cases some federal funds, has allocated a significant amount of money to expanding in our communities. And they've identified the units throughout the state to try to coordinate that. As part of that process, hired a testing coordinator. So this is presumably a temporary position. We've hired an epidemiologic experience in public health in Allegheny County. Clearly, we're in our discussions tonight. There are testing bottlenecks. How, where, and when we at the IE provide relief and resources, that's not entirely clear yet. Just having a position and having funds obviously is not enough to resolve some of the bottlenecks in supply, resources, personnel. But I did mention that people are thinking and working on it, but it is a difficult problem at this time. Any other reports?
A delayed expression of gratitude. We did ask for parent volunteers who had their clearances to help us as we moved our lunch model to that expanded venue where we needed support in other areas of the schools, and we had a great response from the parents and community. So just thanking us to keep the kids safe and spread out throughout the schools. We do appreciate all the support.
Thank you. We'll now second recognition of visitors. If anyone would like to address the board, they may do so at this time.
Is Beth Smallwood here?
I am.
Do you still? Okay.
Do we have any online?
We do not.
In which case, this meeting will adjourn. The board next in executive session following this meeting to discuss real estate, a matter related to long-term substitutes with the Pine-Richland Education Association, an update on a student investigation, and a hiring process update related to the athletic director position. Have a good evening, everyone.